important for you to know, listen carefully what I'm going to say here. It's more important for you to know who has an income tax liability than that you understand that you don't. Because we don't believe that nobody should be paying taxes and all that stuff. People agree to things and it creates tax liabilities for them. Okay. And you'll have more peace in your heart when you're not saying this is an unjust tax, even though it's being applied where people are not happy about it. But the idea is that people are the ones that are empowering this through either fear or ignorance and such as that. Or they like the privileges of being, having the welfare, or that they want the tax write-offs, or they want to function in that, or they don't have the courage to say, like, okay, I'm done. So people are in all sorts of different places with that. No one can determine for someone else how much freedom or tyranny they're willing to put up with. But it's important for you to understand principles of liberty and freedom, because if you understand principles of liberty and freedom, then even if you don't understand law in some capacity, by logic and reason, when you understand principles of freedom, you're going to see whether something's just or unjust. All right, we're don't want to do one of those Walt Disney's at the beginning. So, so I need to be able to see on this when let's see, we should be live, right? We're streaming live. Let's see if it'll. No, that's not it. That's the other one. So are we? Let me see how we can make sure that. Okay, view the channel. So let me see. Is this going to show me, Michael? Okay, there's live. There we go. Let's see that. Okay, there we go. All right. I'm seeing it well, so we'll see if we can see anybody's questions. Okay, there's the chat. All right, cool. All right, awesome. So let's see if any of those chats, if you notice somebody asked a question, then we'll bring it to my attention there. Okay. Well, welcome. Is there something else? Okay. Welcome to Destination Freedom. Today is, well, everyone knows that they want to call this tax day. But what some good thing is that we're broadcasting live because we want to be able to answer any of your questions that you have about this day. And if you feel, like a lot of people feel, that you're all done with this, and people are talking all about uh, whether they should file income taxes or do the demonstration or the tax protest and resistance, um, I want to talk a little bit about that and whether that will be effective or not. I've been doing tax related things since the 90s, and I've been to Washington, D.C., dressed up like V for Vendetta, you know, and uh, and so we we would drive down. I was part of We the People, and oh, we're still on, Michael? Yeah, okay, cool, good. So anyway, so I lost the image. I didn't think we were on, but anyway, so we would demonstrate. And listen, demonstrating, there's a benefit to demonstrating. The biggest thing I would say for demonstrating at all, okay, and that is so that you can see that you're not alone. And that's really the purpose of demonstrating. Because if you think demonstrating is going to change anything in government, you don't really understand how government works then. Because the only thing that these guys care about is uh, that they stay in power. So the only thing they care about is if the numbers don't come out to keep them in power. Because once they get in, that's what they're always concerned with, is the next election and staying in power so that we can continue to head down the road of tyranny. And if you're still talking about um, Democrat and Republican, then you've been duped into the idea that by voting Democrat or Republican that there's going to be a change. And listen, exactly, oh, there's just so much to say about the current political scenario. And just when, I mean, how many times, and I'm just speaking to the Republicans, how many times have the Republicans gotten into power, right? They get the House, they get the Senate, they got the president, they got the White House, they got it all. And they don't even know how to govern when they have it all. And all that's going to happen is that there's going to be some agitation, and they're going to be kicking, they're going to move it forward like the way communism always moves it forward. 2 steps forward. Oh, the people hate what's going on. 1 step back. And then people are like, oh, okay, I got my party. We want 2 steps forward towards tyranny and 1 step back. So it's always encroaching and getting worse and worse. It's the way it goes. It's the way it always goes. And so if you're done with that, then we just invite you to come out of some of that. The most important election going on, truly, politically, is in your town, in your neighborhood, in the smallest place where you can actually know the people that may be serving in some capacity. And usually when you're dealing with your town, you're not always dealing with political parties. Because I know in our little town of, you know, 1,100 people, the party thing isn't showing up in the local town. Now, whether if the town is really doing a good job of running or not, that's to be debated. Okay. And I'd say in my local town, the biggest thing to shut down is the massive amount of money that our little town pays for in our little school. $2 million to educate 100 kids. It's dreadful. Okay. So, but the most important elections are the ones that are closest to you. And every government that's farther away from you, the less power it should have, and the more it becomes political, and the more it moves towards the globalist power. That's what happens all the time. So it's unfortunate, but that's a perspective you have to keep on. So I'm gonna, Michael, can you grab me a water in the? There's some cold water in the fridge there. The but the Yeah, there's probably sparkling water in the other one. So but uh, the interesting thing about this day is, when we're looking at all the social media activity out there about the social media activity about stopping filing and paying income taxes, because that's going to show those people in DC who are not going to reveal any of the corruption, or that no one is going to, be responsible for what's not happening and everything. And and so, hang on 1 second. So I'm going to turn the TV off, Michael, if it's not. I can't see what's playing. Oh, is that what you're working on? Okay, cool. All right, that's awesome. Then I'll just expect that. That's cool. Anyway, so that I just let me tell you a little bit about, how today is going to go. Okay, then that way you can choose to determine uh, whether you want to be a part of this today. One of the things is we're going to do this. We're going to talk a little bit about IRS, uh, up until 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and then we're going to shut down for our client call, which is what we do. Is that every week we have our clients come on to a go-to meeting. That's a private call. That's only for our clients, and we answer questions about things in our processes, and anytime they're dealing with government, and that we can help them problem solve and deal with things. That's our client call. And so our clients, and if you're a client and you're watching this YouTube, then I'm just going to ask that you like and subscribe to our channel. Uh, and one of the goals we have tonight, we'll see what happens. We are about 90, I think it was 96 uh, people away from hitting 2,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed to our channel, then please uh, do so. If these videos and this content serves you and helps you out, then let us know that you appreciate that by uh, being one of our subscribers. We really do appreciate it. I think the algorithm works out that way and gives us that kind of support. So that's one of the goals for today is to have to have our growth happen in real time. That's kind of fun. So anyway, so we'll be doing a little bit of chit chatting here between now and 7 o'clock. Then we'll take an hour break for our client call. Right after our client call is our open call where we'll do questions and answers for people. And by the way, if you have questions on our live chat, I'll see if I can, I don't know if I can see a chat come up. And, but if you have a question, then mark it in here. I'll keep an eye on it and I'll answer your question, uh, real time. And, but anyway, so if you want to be in on our live go-to meeting call, you can go to destinationfreedom.org. This is Wednesday night, 8 o'clock, and you can click on the link. If you just scroll down a little bit on the left, you'll see that link, and then and again, you can participate in the conversation we're having. I can answer your questions, and you can get some of that sentiment. So that'll be from 8 o'clock till 9. After 9, and again, we'll shut down this live call during those calls. That way, we keep things kind of separate, and we can answer all the questions and everything. And we'll come back up after that call, that 8 o'clock call. So it'll be 9 o'clock. If we're done on time, we may take a break, but we'll start at 9. If we're going over and we have some good discussion and all that, then by all means, join us on that call or stand by and we'll go back live on YouTube and we'll talk more about some of the stories IRS stories that I've experienced. And maybe you can tell me some of your IRS stories and write them into our comments and share them with everyone. So the so anyway, so that's where we are this afternoon, and I guess this is around 2 o'clock or so in California, and we have some clients in Hawaii, and we're 6 hours out from Hawaii. And these days, on our Telegram, we're seeing more Australian citizens and Canadians and folks from the UK are interested also in eliminating their income tax liability. And so we have an international call that I think we're going to schedule for next Tuesday. I guess that's the 21st, I believe. And so we're going to do an international call where we'll talk about these principles of income tax liability and such as that. We have some theories on that, some remedies that you might be able to employ, but it's going to require maybe doing some look into the creation of your income tax and how that came about. So you can join us. That's an international call, and you could be from any country in the world, and we can talk about the same subject matter. And we're going to build a little community around that. But there's a lot of people that I just described from Canada and Australia that are interested in the subject matter. We do have a contact in Canada that's been very successful helping people stop filing and all that. And we'll pass that information on to you in that call. And what's interesting is we may, I don't know if it'll work out, but we may have that individual hook up with us, and we may end up doing a specific call with him and talking about what kind of success he's had in Canada. That'd be kind of a cool thing. If you'd like to participate in that kind of video or see that, then mention that in the comments below, and of course we'd like to have you be a part of that. Be sure to and subscribe so you'll get those kind of notifications when we're doing videos. So anyway, so that's some of that. I want to talk about the thing that comes up in my Facebook feed all the time. Michael, what's the name of that one particular group that's on Facebook? Do you remember what the name of it? So it's like tax. Can't think of what that was called. Yeah. Okay, there you go. It's called Federal Income Tax Strike. We're taking our nation back. Well, let's talk about that concept of we're taking our nation back. Okay. See, there's so much that you can look into with respect to the propaganda that the federal government's been pumping out since its inception. You know, and uh, and the crazy thing about it is Americans think that America is a country. And I know those terms, we use that term nation. And listen, that there are people, even the founding fathers make reference to this nation, if you will, even though we're a collective of states. It's not new that there are states within a collective. Okay. We know some of those. Europe is a collective. The European Union came around in the 80s. Everybody is clear about the separate distinction between the governments and the countries of the Netherlands, Italy, France, Spain, Germany. We know those. And so we would never say that Europe's a country or a nation. And I'll bet the European Union would love to have that sentiment, like the programmed people in America are about that America is a nation. Okay. It's the actual what we have. If you look at the Articles of Confederation, you can look it up um, and notice that we have a perpetual union, and this the type of government that is America, if you will, is a confederation of states. It's the small U United States of America. Okay, and so it's a confederation of states. These states are countries. You'd have to understand that they are. All of these states are separate jurisdictions. They have laws that govern them and they don't govern other places. And then there's the federal government, which also is a separate distinction. And there's ways in which the federal government comes into the states. And the Constitution is a limitation on what the federal government can do in the states. And one of the unique things that we have with our work in understanding federal jurisdiction is that we recognize that the Constitution delegates certain power to the federal government by the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8. Article 1, Section 8 discloses delegated power. And one of those powers that's delegated to the federal government is that it has exclusive legislative authority in all cases whatsoever in that 10 square miles, which is Washington, D.C. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. And so there's no limitation by the Constitution in their jurisdiction. It's like driving in on a military base. They put signs outside the base door. It says, when you roll into that military base, your vehicle is subject to search and seizure. There's no constitutional protections. They don't have to go by that when you roll into that base because you've rolled into federal jurisdiction. Certainly the military or the Uniform Code of Military Justice is going to be governing what's going on in that base. Okay. You're handled differently. Same thing when you roll into Washington, D.C. You're handled differently. That's a jurisdictional understanding about it. And this is why I say that federal gun laws are constitutional. But there's limits. And see, this, what I'm telling you here, the feds don't want you to see this distinction because they want you to, put it all together. There are attorneys that even believe federal law trumps state law. That is absolutely wrong. It's not true. Federal law does not trump state law. How do I know that? Murder is a state issue. Okay. If someone gets murdered in a state, the feds don't come in and say, no, our law, we're going to govern this thing, this crime, the state has to invite the federal government in. If you look at Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, it literally says that the federal government has to get the permission of the legislature to be in the states. And that is what happens every time. I noticed in the Constitution, the Washington State Constitution, on the very front of their Constitution, they make it very clear that the federal government can only be in the state by the permission of the legislature. And that is true. Most of the times, the federal government is in the states because they're offering money. And so the state invites them in. And what comes with that is regulation and control. So that's one of the ways that the federal government is in the states. There's another place that the federal government is outside of Washington, D.C., and that is with its citizen. Okay? And that is the IRS and both the State Department define U.S. citizenship by the 14th Amendment. You just ask them, they'll tell you that's the case. Okay? And that is a citizen that's subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So you can see that when you claim the privilege of being a federal citizen, you're going to be subject to the jurisdiction thereof. When you have firearms as a U.S. citizen, that's not a citizen of one of the states, but if you're claiming yourself to be a U.S. citizen on your tax forms, on other places, when you're asked the question, are you a United States citizen? You're saying yes. You may be agreeing to being a 14th Amendment citizen. That 14th Amendment citizen, federal gun laws bind that 14th Amendment citizen. Where? Everywhere. Even in the tax code, it says that that a U.S. citizen or resident alien, that even though they're not in the District of Columbia, they'll be treated as being in the District of Columbia. That's how that citizenship works. Even on the instructions that you look into on the 1040 instructions, you'll see that it says, these rules apply to all U.S. citizens and resident aliens. And so, and it says these rules apply to all U.S. citizens, regardless of where they live, and resident aliens. And the interesting thing about resident aliens, most aliens that have visas on paper are residing in the District of Columbia on paper, even though they physically are not in the District of Columbia, they're maybe in one of the states. They're actually non-resident. So that's, people think they know what they're talking about when the tax code is very clear on the subject matter. And that's why those some of the things that we help with. So anyway, this is all standard stuff when you're looking into understanding the subject matter and jurisdiction. Things may not be what you see. Okay, so here's one of the questions. It says, why do states enforce U.S. federal laws, i.e. civil rights, ADA? It seems like the state is acting out of its jurisdiction. Well, it's interesting. That's a great question, and one of the things is that those states invite those laws in, and let me back up again and say that even the state, as a corporation, okay, it has employees, and so it will have a tax ID number. So any corporation that has a tax ID number is going to be subject to federal law, because having a tax ID number means that they're doing a trade or business in the United States, or they're doing the performance of the functions of a public office. And so the state itself, being a corporation, having a tax ID number, is in federal jurisdiction by their own choice. They don't have to have a tax ID number, but they're participating just like any other corporation that has a tax ID number. Again, having a tax ID number means you're doing a trade or business in the United States, District of Columbia. You don't have to get an IRS tax ID number. You can do a business without that. But everyone that gets one of those is going to have filing requirements and are going to have to follow the Title 26, which is the tax code. So, and again, the state itself can't violate those laws that the federal government has. But if you were to look, well, I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. I was working I was cleaning glass and for a company, and I was dealing with my ladders and all that. And some safety guy at the company came up to me and was telling me that what I was doing wasn't in alignment with OSHA regulations. And I told him I wasn't subject to anything with OSHA. I didn't have a corporation as a company. I had no employees. OSHA laws don't govern that particular company. If you're a corporation, OSHA laws would apply for corporations. Again, that's why for many of our clients that come to us and they have corporations, we pull them all out of the public, which corporations are, and we move them into the private. So, so that's one of the reasons is states are in federal jurisdiction by their own choice. Again, they don't have to, but they do, because and listen, the feds are into that. And listen, there's lots of money that's put out when the federal government wants to invite a state to adopt those federal laws and things like that. Um, and it can change, but the state uh, brings in those and makes themselves subject to those laws by their own choices and their own action. And so that's how that plays out. And the amazing thing is this system works really well because most people don't really understand the jurisdiction between the state and the federal. And really to understand it, you may have to look at the relationship between the state and its creation of the federal government. Okay, that might be part of um, what you look into is reading the founding fathers about how each state is foreign to each other and foreign to themselves. I mean, to the federal government. Another concept that escapes people is the concept of domestic and foreign. Domestic and foreign are always they're always juxtaposed to each other. If you are not a citizen of California, then you are foreign or an alien to California. Domestic is always internal and foreign is always external. Okay. The federal, whatever's in the District of Columbia in federal jurisdiction, that's going to always be, as the tax code says, is domestic. And everything outside of that is foreign. So every state is foreign to the federal government in reality. But what's taught and what's practiced in people's heads is if it's outside of America, it's foreign. That's the way they like to think about it, even though that's not how law reads. And look, you can look up in Title 26, 7701, the terms domestic, foreign, and it'll tell you exactly what it means. As long as you make sure that you understand that the definition of the term United States is also the District of Columbia. And the definition in the tax code for state is also the District of Columbia. If you don't get those words correct in the tax code, you will not understand the tax code, or at least who it applies to. That being said, I invite you to go to Destination Freedom. We have a 6-hour class. You can go to the website and sign up for it, and it'll let you know um, who has an income tax liability. We say what the IRS says. We teach in our classes that who owes the federal income tax? That would be all U.S. citizens, regardless of where they live, and resident aliens. That's what it says. And again, I said earlier, what is a U.S. citizen? A U.S. citizen is a 14th Amendment citizen. And of course, like I said, resident aliens. That's who has an income tax liability. So, unlike other tax guys that are out there talking a lot about this stuff, they believe most people don't have an obligation to file and pay. I'm saying the opposite of that. I'm saying most people have the obligation to file and pay based upon their own testimony, based upon what they believe about themselves. If they believe that they're a 14th Amendment citizen, or I would say a U.S. citizen, and they don't get that term United States right, then they may be claiming that they have an income tax liability, even though the statute or Title 26 says differently. Same thing with the resident alien. It's really quite profound when you take a look at it. And so anyway, that's a common thing out there. And listen, it's not the only. Um, uh, there's a number of people out there that are promoting certain tax remedies and believe that the IRS is that the income tax is unconstitutional. Well, I'm going to tell you that the income tax is absolutely constitutional, and and I'm guessing that people hate the idea that I say that. They many times they'll go to the 16th Amendment, and sometimes even in the government, I think IRS will even say the 16th Amendment allows the government to to receive taxes from whatever source derived. I have to say that Dave not Dave Can David Champion Dave Champion. Uh, he has a video where he talks about excise taxes and direct taxes. That is an excellent, um, very short overview of taxation in general. Okay. The Supreme Court has determined that the income tax is an excise tax. So there has to be a privilege that is being offered that tax would be applied to. And the privilege of that is the federal citizen, the 14th Amendment citizen. It literally says in there in the 14th Amendment that it guarantees privileges and immunities. It literally says it in that amendment to the Constitution. Now, of the opinion that the um, I'm of the opinion that the 14th Amendment was never properly ratified because they were imposing that upon the southern states. Okay. And the other thing is, I've read the book, The Law That Never Was, by, I'm spacing his name off the top of my head. But anyway, I have a signed copy of his book. That's an excellent read. And he goes and shows you the requirements of how an amendment to the Constitution must be. And that amendment was never properly ratified. But here's the trouble. And this is the principle that I talk about in our class. It doesn't really matter what the law says. Okay. People want to say in America that um, we're a nation of laws. Let me tell you something. A nation of laws is not a good thing, folks. It's a bad thing. In Timothy, in the scriptures, it says laws are for the lawless. Okay. That's the reality. And so my opinion is that all men are above the law. What we really want to say about law and men, if you will, is that no man in government is above the law. And guess what's happening today? Everyone in DC is above the law. So that's where we have breakdown, okay? Don't worry about you and me. Listen, if we were governing ourselves by love, there's no need for law, okay? Laws are there for the lawless, for everything that is contrary to sound doctrine. That's what laws are for. And we talk about this in our state versus federal citizenship class, where you get to look at and see that laws, the only just law is a law that secures rights and nothing else. Because the only purpose of a just government is to secure rights and nothing else. So everything outside, the first benefit of law is to bind government, to not violate you. And that's where statute and code comes in, is really to keep government at bay. But the more things that come into government, every business that wants privileges and immunities incorporates so that their personal assets can be protected from their bad business practices. And so they connect to government. Government promises them these privileges and immunities. That's why corporations are bad. It's business. If you want freedom in your business, Get out of your corporation. Secure things personally and don't harm anyone. And if you do, make it right. Take care of it. Be responsible. Don't just harm people and figure out what you're going to pay out and just figure, oh, it's just the cost of doing business. No problem. We're making $1 billion a year. We pay out $22 million in, in liabilities. It's good business practice. That's terrible. That's why a lot of the trouble we have in the world is because of government in bed with business. Any good thing that you put together in with government makes it a bad thing because you see, government is forced. Government's not your friend. I think George Washington, or one of the founding fathers, talked about that government is like a fire. It has to be bound and controlled. Otherwise, it's going to hurt you. So it's just amazing that we're not really taught these things in school. Certainly not in like elementary school or even like secondary school, high school. Kids are coming out of high school, becoming an adult. They don't even know how to be on a jury. It's amazing. So I want to go back to that Facebook poster, that page that talks about the tax. What's the term they were using? Not rebellion. It was right, the income tax strike. I don't recommend it because you're the only one that's going to get harmed. I'll promise you, you're stopping paying the IRS for any amount of time is not going to harm or send a message or a shot across the bow of any political leader anywhere. Okay, you're just going to have a good feeling about it, but but the good feeling is going to bite you. Why? If you don't file, then the algorithm sees your social security number, tax ID number, whatever it is, and they're gonna send you a letter saying, hey, you forgot to file. And if you ignore that or you write back and say, I'm not gonna file, and let's say you fill out your 1040 and you write your rebellion on there, if you sign a 1040 and you send it to IRS outside of the way they like it, they're gonna consider it frivolous and they may charge you $5,000 for that. But let's say you don't do that. Let's say you just stop filing. You'll get notification if you're employed. If you want to stop something, don't stop filing, stop withholding, stop sending them money before you owe it. But it'll be very difficult for you to do that because if you work for a corporation, then they're going to withhold because you give them permission with your W-4 form. And the W-4 form is just like the W-9 if you're contracting. You allow the company to disclose or share your private information, and they report to the IRS the amount of money that you've received, and you give them permission for that. A lot of people will say, well, I have to fill these out, like the W-9. They say, well, you have to fill out a W-9. No, you don't. How do I know that? The first word on the W-9 is request. A request is not a demand. It's just, but we're in the tradition of it, and that's what's binding. So even if the law is not saying that there's an obligation, we practice like it's an obligation. So it doesn't really matter if the law says one thing. All of a sudden, there's the reality of how it's being practiced or enforced. That's what's really going to matter. See, so unfortunately, that's true. So what happens is, so if you're not going to file, and then if they determine, and if let me say this, if you don't fill out the 1040, then the paperwork moves along in a certain way to where they're going to figure out, based upon information from third parties, that you've been paid certain amounts of money, and then they'll put together a 1040 on your behalf without any of the write-offs. It'll be just straight up. And the way that the pathway works, they'll figure out what they believe you owe. And listen, they're not going to hide it. it's going to be more than if you'd have filled out your tax forms and filed anyway. It's going to be more. And then they're going to charge you interest and penalties. So if you went 1 year, 2 years, a number of years, it's you're going to pay. Or they're going to do liens and levies, and they're going to take your property from asking a third party to give it to you. So it's not worth it. See, it's not like if you work for government. See, when the government goes, they can't afford their budget and they shut it all down. Remember when the government shut down, and there may be certain people that are not working and they're not paying them while they're not working. Okay. But they're not worried. And especially if they prepare in some way to be okay. But they're not worried because the truth is once they figure out they're going to borrow more money to balance the budget or whatever it is, they don't just start their pay back up and start paying them. They give them all the money that they were when they weren't working. All they get money as if they were working retroactively. So they're 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 not taking on the chin. So out here in reality land, it's the opposite. If you don't file, they're going to keep track of exactly, and you're still going to owe. So I don't recommend the tax strike. If you don't want to file federal income taxes and state income taxes, then you're going to need to eliminate your income tax liability. And this process is about coming out of that jurisdiction. Okay. And the number one way that you have a tax liability is being a U.S. federal citizen, a citizen of the District of Columbia. And you decide that. You're the one that fills out forms declaring yourself to being a federal 14th Amendment citizen. So it's unfortunate, but you are definitely empowering the IRS. So if you want to come out of that and eliminate the liability, then come to DestinationFreedom.org and we will help you navigate this path. We've done this before. We help Americans all over the world do these processes, and we begin that process with a passport process with the State Department. And listen, this is not expatriation. You're not giving up. What am I giving up? I would say, let me say this. By doing this process, there is no reaction to where all of a sudden this stops or something like that. If you're on welfare, I mean, that doesn't show up that way. Okay. But most of the time when people are saying, what am I giving up? It's some form of welfare. And Social Security is welfare. Okay. Whether you like it or not, or you think you're entitled to it because you paid in, you misunderstand what it is you're participating in. You might have to look up the 1935 Social Security Act. But that's usually what they're saying is if you're when you're giving up your federal citizenship, you may be giving up welfare. So that might be your choice. Maybe you want to be on welfare. Well, then file and pay your taxes, okay? And some people, live off the system in that way, and others, they don't want to have anything to do with it. Listen, we have a client that was in China, and he wanted to do our process, and I said, so what's the reason you want to do the process? And his sentiment was, I so detest those people and the District of Columbia. I don't want that energy on me. He says, I don't want to have that karma of how evil things are and how not interrupting all that criminal activity. And so that's what his sentiment was. He didn't want he didn't want the karma. And I thought that was beautiful, that was important to him. So yeah, that's one of those things. So yeah, we'll invite you, instead of taking a tax strike, you can actually walk out the front door of the plantation and just say, okay, I've had enough. But the thing that you'll have to be doing is you'll have to take on responsibility for yourself. One of the pathways of freedom is through responsibility. So we have there. Does it look like there's looks like there's an 8 people that are on. So we're glad that you're tuning in, and we're gonna see we're gonna tumble along and see how this goes. And of course, if you have any questions about any of this or any sort of even sentiment or what have you, you know, put it in there and share some of that. Now, one of the things I've noticed about YouTube is that the questions that come in our live chat, do they show up? They don't show up in the in the video once the video is done, is it? Is there a way that we can have the questions? You'd have to huh? I thought they don't show up in there. Oh, is that how it works there? Okay, well, see, learning something new every day. Um, but no, the questions usually are pretty awesome. And so yeah, so we have about 8 people. Someone left and off to dinner. That's cool. Yeah, we're sitting here about almost 10 minutes at the top of the hour, and the whole purpose of staying on here is so that we can answer your questions. I want to talk a little bit about some past IRS interaction. Let me first talk about how we came across this understanding of that there are two citizens in the United States. There's a wonderful book called Vultures and Eagles Clothing by Lynn Meredith, and that was pretty simple book. Have it, I guess it's over here. Very simple book that I know. So that's there. I'll grab it. Hold there, Alan. Yeah, it's an awesome book. It looks like this one, you know, um, Vultures and Eagles Clothing. That's when I found out that there are two types of citizens in the United States. That's not common knowledge. And when you're really thinking about it, there's citizens of the Union, and then there's citizens of the states. I mean, I bet the European Union would love that there would be citizens of the European Union. Because listen, Italians are European. They just don't want to claim that, right? So, there are those distinctions. And let me tell you, there's some real distinctions in America. New Yorkers are not the same kind of people that are from California and nor Texas. That's a unique type of people in Texas. And in those southern states, there's some they definitely have different flavors from state to state. These are countries, north and south, east to west. It's all like that. Anyway, so that's where I found out about that there was more than one type of citizen, and it's exciting. We've had this communication with the State Department. We've done thousands of passports over the years, and listen, the State Department is capable of charging people with perjury if they are lying or not being truthful on their passport applications. Never seen anything like that. We've noticed that sometimes in passport applications, when someone will say, uh, the instructions say that if you were never issued a Social Security number from the Social Security Administration, you can put zeros on your application. And we do that with some of our clients' children that typically don't have Social Security numbers. That's interesting. But if you're just making up and saying, I don't want to have that, it's not my number, it's theirs, and it's true. It isn't your number, it's theirs. But but the Social Security Administration has issued, then they want that number on there. And if you don't put it on there, and you put zeros, they may charge you with perjury. We've seen them do that. So that's why we do the passport process. Then the follow-up book on especially dealing with IRS is this book is How to Cook a Vulture, which is kind of interesting. And I bet you can find these books online. Anyway, I was going to say this is that book, The Law That Never Was. It's Bill Benson. Yeah. No, I'm sorry, Benson Beckman. I thought it was Bill Benson. Bill Benson, I thought was Bill Benson. There must be another gentleman that worked with him, Beckman. But it's a good read. And I personally believe the 17th Amendment was never properly ratified. That's where senators are chosen in a popular election instead of by the legislatures from the states. The Senate has, we have 2 senators from every state. The states are represented in the Congress by the Senate, and now they're popularly elected. It's they have the people voting for senators federally. So I believe that the 17th Amendment is never ratified because I don't believe any state would gladly give that power up. Because Frederick Douglass says, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will. Find out what people will submit to, and you'll have found the exact amount of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue until they're resisted with either words or blows or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance in those who they oppress. Maybe I paraphrase some of that, but the idea is that power concedes nothing without a demand. So I believe that the 17th Amendment was never ratified, but someone said it was ratified, and that's all they care about. And then once it's there and we start practicing, it doesn't matter if it was ratified properly or not. People are looking at it as if it is. And that's all that has to happen. So it's interesting. All right, we have some other questions here. All right, let's see if this was. Here's a question. I have 1099s and put in withholding for next year on my unearned income so I don't get slammed with $3,000 owed between Fed and state. I've been thinking if I do this. So again, the 1099, it's not that you have 1099s. You're doing a W-9. It's the W-9 that empowers the other party to fill out a 1099 on your behalf. So it isn't your 1099, it's their 1099. You never sign a 1099. You're signing the W-9. You're allowing the company to either withhold or disclose. For our clients, we have a special exemption type of W-9, and they don't empower the corporation to withhold. There's no filing. And the exemption is based upon the certificate of foreign status, which is a W-8. So we have that for the clients. And again, how you fill these things out and, whether you're doing an exemption or temporarily, we want to have you actually eliminate your liability so you don't have to participate in any of that. So that not that you're going to get slammed in any particular time. We're saying you don't have to participate that in anymore. So so there's some of that. How long? Let's make sure I can read all this. How long should? Let me see if I can't see behind it. How long should? Oh, there we go. How long after we submit our passport application with explanatory statement should we do the FOIA? Oh, that's a good question. I would say once you get your passport booking card, when you've done that process, then you can do it immediately. It's that because it has to be signed by the Secretary of State, which is Mark Rubio now. If you just get copies of your file, it won't take very long because no one has to sign off. Those won't be certified. You can't use those in court. If you get certified copies that are sealed, they have to be signed by the Secretary of the United States. And so therefore it takes longer. Could be even up to 6 months or 3 to 6 months before you get those certified copies. Usually what happens is once you've submitted the FOIA request, then about halfway you might get a letter saying, hey, we have your request. It's first in, first out. And so that usually comes at about the halfway point. And then they'll follow up with that. Oh, I'm so blessed that there's questions. Thank you for that. So what's that? Is that Ruth? Is it Ruth? Let me see. See, I should have my reading glasses on. Ruth 1107 says, I'm basically working now to pay taxes. I know, it's so sad. I mean, if you're paying 25, 30% of your labor is in taxes. And the feds are one thing, then you add the state onto that, minus other things, Social Security and other things that it's like you may be moving closer to 50% of your income that you're so half the year you work for the government in essence without compensation, and then the other half, that's when you can start making money. Yeah, you can be all done with that. I mean, it's an exciting time to begin the process, and it's really refreshing. Um, so then it goes on. It says, this is Ron in Texas. All right. Well, hey, glad you're on, Ron in Texas. And he says, hello. Um, then another person, says, I have a long-term payment agreement with the IRS, so I can pay it. So I can pay it. I guess this type of work wouldn't exempt me from this plus, but yeah. So if you may have been filling out forms improperly. So let's say you were improperly filling out forms and sending information and money to a foreign country that you thought you owed. Let me make up a scenario like as if you visited a foreign country and then all of a sudden you came back and all of a sudden they start sending you a bill every year. You'd say, well, wait a minute, how am I being taxed? I'm not if it was like Italy, Germany, I'm not German. I don't live in that jurisdiction or in Germany. How are you taxing me? That would be the question you'd be asking because you're not in that location or from that location. See, we clearly would understand that concept. Well, what happens is that people are citizens of the District of Columbia. That's what they're saying about themselves, and that's what's creating the tax liability. You can say that you're a citizen of your state. That's a real thing. You know. So once you see this jurisdiction, it's really quite profound, and then you realize that maybe you don't want the privilege of being a federal citizen, that you want to be responsible for yourself as a state citizen, and a state citizen is based in habitation and domicile. So it's interesting. Let's see here. Person says, uh, I I had to do the passport application again because they never put my explanatory statement with my passport the first time, so I did it again. Understandably, we have probably a half a dozen or handful of clients that were in the same thing where the State Department failed to put the explanatory statement in the record. Sometimes it's the client's issue because they may have mailed back the explanatory statement and they should have mailed it and said you're supposed to keep it. That's come up. And then sometimes they'll have the first page, but they won't have a second page. It many times is a mess. There was one time uh, there was a show called I think it was like 60 Minutes um, that did some sort of report. But I remember seeing that the reporters were going into not the IRS, the passport agency's offices there, and they were looking at all these passport files. They were strewn all over. It was a mess, and there was not, there wasn't any protection of privacy and all that stuff. And yes, we see the results of those kind of messes, and that's it's not fun, but that's government for you. Here's another one. Did you see um, Marjorie Taylor Greene interview with the guy from Freedom Law School? Yeah, Paymont. I did. I saw it. I didn't watch it all, but it's be interesting. I have to say that Paymont, he's really good he's really good marketing guy. He's got the outfit, everything. It's all cool. I like him about that, and so and I like his ballsiness. It's really kind of cool. Um, but we do disagree in certain things, and he has his disposition on some level, and he doesn't like IRS any more than we do in that regard. Um, But he believes the IRS is doing things fraudulently or illegally or wrong or bad or whatever. I don't share that sentiment. Now, even though I don't share that sentiment, doesn't say that they're always doing the right thing based on statute and code. Not saying that they're perfect in that. But as far as jurisdiction, the people are the ones that are empowering the IRS. And I think Paymon would agree with that as well, that it's the people that are empowering the IRS. Um, so, but again, he's really good at promoting. He's an awesome guy in that regard. We should probably hire him. No, we disagree and in some of the foundation of uh, of what we promote and teach, you know. But our process is not a fight. Is not a fight with the IRS. We're not fighting. Again, we agree with the IRS in that they have an obligation to collect taxes from all U.S. citizens, regardless of where they live, and resident aliens. We believe that the difference is what you're claiming about yourself, you know. So, but anyway, says I work online, so I'm boss and employee. I'm asking if I did this process, would you exempt me from 2025 taxes and also cost me money? I have a passport. I understand it goes through a process. Yeah, a couple things is, well, you know, as you can well imagine, I can't tell you what you should do. You have to see it for yourself. And if you take our class, the state versus federal citizenship, and you look at it and you look at the tax code and can understand what it's saying. And again, you're not having to go into the tax code to see what application is. You're you're determining who the code is subject to that code. Okay. You get to look at that. Um, and so um, but you can begin this at any time. And I'm saying that if you have never had a tax liability, then that might be the conversation you have with IRS is that you believed you had a tax liability, you filed in and paid in the past, and maybe that's not true for you today. But no one can determine that but for you. If you've had a passport before, you definitely filled it out as, I mean, you may have filled it out as a federal citizen. I remember being at the Browns trial. That's Edna Lane Brown in New Hampshire. And the IRS had their passport application up on the big screen and it was showing that they had signed the oath saying that they were, you know, a citizen of the United States. So we saw that and said, wow, we should probably get certified copies of our passport records showing that we're not a 14th Amendment citizen, that we're a citizen of our state based on habitation and domicile. So, so yeah, you would need to do that again. And then if you have a payment arrangement, we may have to reach out to IRS and let them know what errors you have made and that they should correct those errors as you know, bring that information, accurate information, um, you know, update it and make it correct. And see, that's really a lot of our process is just paperwork, making your paperwork correct. Um, Says grateful to be feeling butter. Oh, that's funny. This morning, it's not well at all. This is a troll. Someone, well, I'll let you guys read that. It's nothing that there's no question in there for me, but it's some beautiful word art, and so I'm thankful for your participation in that regard. It says, I get that we basically said to be, you know, let me see what it said. Said to be DC citizens. And again, that is the 14th Amendment, citizens subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And again, people will make reference to the word rights when making, like my 14th Amendment rights. There are no 14th Amendment rights. Rights don't show up for it, you know, show up in that amendment. It says privileges and immunities and it makes reference, you know, there's kind of a phrase in the 14th Amendment that sounds like the Fifth Amendment. And this is an interesting thing when understanding this amendment. Any of the politicians and legislatures all over that adopted the 14th Amendment knew what the Fifth Amendment said about due process and all that. Well, if the first citizens of the United States, the blacks that were slaves, were, if they really considered them people, then they would just recognize that they were citizens of their states, and that um, they already had protections with the Fifth Amendment. But the federal citizen that's subject to the jurisdiction thereof doesn't have the protections in the Constitution the citizens of the states do. Because remember, the citizens that are subject to the jurisdiction thereof, they are subject to, as it says in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, that the exclusive legislative authority in all cases whatsoever. So that's what gives the Constitution gives them the authority to tax and regulate their citizens. So says I'm saying that I'd likely pay you because I'm not sure if I could do this myself. Yeah, that's all well and good. We're delighted to help in any way we can. Just reach out to us on DestinationFreedom.org and let us know that you want to move things forward, and we'll be glad to assist you in setting up something, so that you can move out of that jurisdiction and do stuff on your own and be responsible and be able to keep 100% of your hard labor. Someone says, hopefully your video with Jeff Berwick brings you more clients. Oh, that's very nice. Yeah, that's a new video we did just a bit ago. And it's always a pleasure to talk to Jeff. Um, he's done a lot of this internal work and how he deals with his mindset about, uh, being able to address some of the very negative things in the world with a good attitude, and then to be able to be responsible for himself in many categories. And Jeff's a big fan of our work, and we're thankful for that. And so we partner up in this regard, and so we're delighted to have you be a part of that benefit. Yeah, the Dollar Vigilante community is lovely. And if you ever get a chance to, in February of next year, want to come down and hang out at an Acapulco, whether it's in Puerto Vallarta um, or down in Acapulco, it's just lovely to be in Mexico at that time of year when it's so cold in New Hampshire. All right, then let's see. Oh, that's cool. Yep, it's great. Let's see. So what is it? Person says heard about through Monerotopia. Oh yeah, that was cool. Yeah, the Monerotopia. Well, that's good to know. That's someone from Monerotopia, Michael. That's a that's cool. Yeah, I went to a couple years ago. I guess it was before. I guess it was. I can't remember if that was before the COVID crap or not, um, but we were in Miami. Whenever it was, the Bitcoin conference was in Miami. When you went there, it was very corporate. All the, it was all about money and all that stuff. And so it didn't have the same freedom people or community vibe that when you would go over to Monerotopia, where they had a healthy distrust for government, they were into privacy. And of course, Monero is a privacy cryptocurrency coin, or token. It's, it's lovely when you think about freedom in that capacity. So that community, we resonate really well with, and people would realize that they're, kindred spirits, you know. But yeah, that's great. I'm glad that through uh, that conference, or through just Monerotopia, which is, I think there's a video interview on the Monerotopia channel. So that's cool. So yeah, so we're sitting a little bit after 6 o'clock, and we're gonna do a call. Here's what's gonna happen coming up in the next 45 minutes or so, if we'll make it through the 45 minutes. When I have a client call, and so we'll drop off live, and I'll do the client call, and then what we'll do is, after the client call, we're gonna move right into our um, we'll move into our open or our public call, if you will. Anyone can sign into that. So if you want to find out where that is, that's at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. You want to go to the DestinationFreedom.org website and scroll down a little bit on the left. There will be a link to that call. You just come in. You're able to talk freely, or you can, of course, chat and text and all that as well. But we're able to engage with each other, and it's really a little bit more personal uh, than some of this on YouTube. Uh, but it's that's going to be from 8 to 9. And if we determine at some point in the open call that we've answered all the questions and all that, then we may drop down and then we'll take a short break or so, and then we'll go live on YouTube at 9 o'clock. And what I'm looking to do is um, we're going to be on from 9 to midnight. Now, here's what's happening all over America tonight. Many post offices are open all the way to midnight. I think in many states, probably in many jurisdictions, typically when there's a lot of people. And the post office, so they can postmark your app, your 1040 form, so that you can get it in under the wire. I remember, I don't know how many years did we do that demonstrating, Michael, in Portsmouth? Maybe like 4 or 5 years or more, or I don't know. It was like every year on April 15th, there'd be a demonstration of some sort. And so, and what would happen is, um, I was the state coordinator for We the People. That was Bob Schultz's organization. It was GiveMeLiberty.org. But anyway, I was this New Hampshire state coordinator. And so we'd have the literature from the organization and all that there. But I would go down to downtown Portsmouth. That's Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And down on, I guess it's Daniel Street, I think there. And there's a federal building. And up on like the third or fourth floor is the IRS. And then right next or connected to the federal building, there's the post office is right there in Portsmouth. Anyway, so I go down, down early in the morning on April the 15th, like today, and would just hand out constitutions and literature and things like that. And sometimes we would have signs um, and do, I don't know if we have any of those pictures. I don't think we don't have any way of uploading those pictures there. But anyway, you can do Google searches for my name and taxes and New Hampshire and all that stuff, and those pictures are all out there. A lot of times it'd be the front page of the newspaper when we're doing these demonstrations. But anyway, we'd have signs saying, you don't have to file or pay, or no answers, no taxes. I think um, that's what the sentiment was with We the People. No answers, no taxes, because they had a redress of grievances. They wanted to find out um, what law requires most people to file and pay. And listen, in the tax honesty movement, okay, that's a common question that people have out there. They say, "Show us the law that requires most Americans to file and pay income taxes." Well, this isn't rocket science, okay? And I'm going to tell you the law, okay? It's the Constitution. That's the law, okay? Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. It gives the federal government exclusive legislative authority in all cases whatsoever in their jurisdiction. So the tax code would fall in that category, okay? So if you're in federal jurisdiction, in that, not only Washington, D.C., which is what it says, but also talks about every place purchased by the United States. That would include Guam, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, America, Samoa. And if you don't believe me, look up the term United States in the tax code. You'll see that it means those same things. Okay. And then there's the 14th Amendment citizen, which is subject to the jurisdiction thereof. They're also in federal jurisdiction, and that's why they have an income tax liability. That simple. So there's your law that requires most people to file. And it's the people choosing it themselves. they're saying that they are a U.S. 14th Amendment citizen, or at least they're saying they're a U.S. citizen. If you ask IRS and you ask State Department, they're going to tell you they define the term by the 14th Amendment. So another question, let's see what we got here. Let's see. Says, should I include a copy of my certified explanatory statement in a letter back to IRS disputing past debts? Well, that is an interesting question, and uh, I would say I wouldn't waste your time with that, okay? Because you're not um, you're not having to prove to any, whatever IRS agent would pick up or see that documentation. They're not an expert. They're not going to understand what you're saying necessarily, and they may or may not be the one that determines whether you have a tax liability or not. So I would say I would hold that document for when or if you ever show up in court, where that's in court where you could produce that kind of evidence, that if a jury were to see it, would they understand what was in your explanatory statement? So that's my suggestion is don't, you know, if you're going to present that information to somebody and it's going to say something, make sure the person who's reading it is going to understand it and then can do something about it. Okay. So that's what you want to qualify. No, but whatever was in your explanatory statement, maybe that's you're going to write to the IRS about that. But again, I don't know what your explanatory statement says, okay? And I so if I'm telling you this and you've got things that are conflated or frivolous or some sort, then they may write to you and say that that's a frivolous return or whatever it is. They may want to charge you $5,000, which is so you want to be careful that you're not, alleging that. And listen, some people will say that this subject matter is frivolous as well, state citizenship, and it is frivolous. IRS says that what I'm talking about, this state citizenship, is frivolous. But if you read what it says in their letters and in those court cases when they're saying it's frivolous, it says that a taxpayer cannot say that they're a state citizen and this and that. Because a taxpayer is one that owes an internal revenue tax. So if you're being referred to as a taxpayer, you might have to say, I'm not a taxpayer. And listen, I don't take a term that there's someone's trying to say I am and then add the word non on the beginning of it, like as if that's juxtaposed. That's not that's not a good idea. You can say you're not a taxpayer. That may because that's the term you're saying you're not a I'm a non-taxpayer. That means you are a taxpayer, but the non-kind. I mean, in the sense of it doesn't make a good break on that. So if you're not a citizen, you may be a non-citizen national. That's what some people want to say because that's what it says on the tax form. But a non-citizen national is someone who's born in America's Samoa and Swains Island. So again, that's in federal jurisdiction. So being a non-citizen isn't necessarily what you're wanting to claim. You can say, I'm not a citizen. And what's juxtaposed to citizen is always going to be alien. Okay. So if you're not a citizen, you'll be alien to that particular jurisdiction, whatever that may be. So we're watching the time here. Oh, we got lots of time. But anyway, these are things that you can learn about in our foundational class, State versus Federal Citizenship, the Unknown Choice. Let's see here. We have someone else that says, this person says, should I include? No, we got that already. Let's see here. Here's another question. Thanks for doing this tonight. I purchased a state citizenship class and we'll take it next week. Awesome. That's I guess I can't say. I'll see all. Let's see. That's the point. I'd like to your team go through the full passport process. That's great. So yeah, we're glad to have you come on board. We'll look for that. You signing up for the class, and depends on how you paid for it, signed up. We'll go ahead and give you access right away. after our calls tonight, we'll go and take a look at that. Make sure that you can get in there, and then we'll answer any questions. Don't forget, each week you can come on our live Q&A, our open call, if you will. That's on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. You can come in, and if you have questions, that's cool. Once you become a client, uh, and you're not a client if you take the class. The class is available for anybody. You don't have to do these processes if you determine that you know that you maybe you are a federal citizen, or maybe you just don't have the confidence to do it at this time. But if you become a client and you do our hold harmless agreement, and you want to move forward in that, well, then of course we have a client call each week just before our open call, and that's available to you, and we can get your questions answered. Make sure that you have a lot of uh, support, because we definitely want you to be successful in some of this administrative corrections. So, and I want to make a point, a principle, point of principle, because people think that, oh, geez, I have to understand the whole tax code in order for me to understand what I'm doing here. And it's just not true. When you're dealing with jurisdiction, you're really going to be determining who or what or where you are, some of these broad strokes when you're looking at that. Um, so I want to encourage you that if you're going to study something really at the beginning, is that you want to understand the principles of liberty and freedom. So where would you learn about principles of liberty and freedom? For many Christians and all, that might be in the scripture, is to understand your relationship with the divine, where you understand um, where freedom comes from, and it doesn't come from government. And that rights that come from God are natural rights. You're born with them. That's not civil rights. Civil rights may be called rights, but they're really privileges. Okay. And so that's not what you're not looking for statutory things. The Constitution doesn't give you anything. The Constitution is just a, a document that if those who swear to uphold it, they would have your back, or they would make sure that your rights are not going to be violated. Okay. And so we don't have constitutional rights. We only have natural rights. They may be constitutionally protected rights, but again, it's not constitutional rights. There's no such thing. So, someone says on here, if I'm looking to exempt myself 2025, still, would you recommend filing an extension today? And I there's no way for me to answer that question. If you're looking for tax advice, I would call I would call your accountant or your certified public accountant who's going to give you tax advice. I don't have any tax advice. See, what I'm I don't want to help you navigate within the tax code. I want to determine if you're subject to it. Those answers are going to be much easier. Only you can determine whether or how you're going to come out of that jurisdiction. Okay, you're asking me how to govern yourself within that jurisdiction. See, so that's why I really can't answer the question. Um, so once again, that's up to you to navigate. And listen, we have clients that do, one way or another way. Sometimes people will pay and then they'll come out elegantly when they're not paying in, and they're closing this down and they're moving on. Some people say, nope, I'm not paying. I never owed it and all that. So it's not for anyone to determine what's best for you. You really have to see it for yourself. You have to know what's the pathway you're going to go. And here's something that's important to know. It's more important for you to know, listen carefully what I'm going to say here. It's more important for you to know who has an income tax liability than that you understand that you don't. Because we don't believe that, nobody, should be paying taxes and all that stuff. People agree to things and it creates tax liabilities for them. Okay. And you'll have more peace in your heart when you're not saying this is an unjust tax, even though it's being applied where people are not happy about it. Okay. But the idea is that people are the ones that are empowering this through either fear or ignorance and such as that. Or they like the privileges of being having the welfare, or that they want the tax write-offs, or they want to function in that, or they don't have the courage to say like, okay, I'm done. So people are in all sorts of different places with that. No one can determine for someone else how much freedom or tyranny they're willing to put up with. But but it's important for you to understand principles of liberty and freedom, because if you understand principles of liberty and freedom, then even if you don't understand law in some capacity, by logic and reason, when you understand principles of freedom, you're going to see whether something's just or unjust. You're going to see if something needs your permission or not. Those are going to be principled things that you're going to understand, and it's going to help you navigate the space much better. So that's uh, that's an important thing. Um, Looks like we have a small, lovely group here tonight, and we're coming down the pike here. Um, so I wonder if we should take a bit of a break before we get into our next call. That'd probably be a cool thing here. So here's what we'll do. Yeah, I think we're going to do that. We're going to wrap up. We're here at the bottom of the hour. We have a half an hour before our next call. So what we're going to do is, and so you all can join us on the 8 o'clock call. Just go to DestinationFreedom.org, and there's a link on there. You can join us on the live call on GoToMeeting, and we'll pick up where we left off here. Okay. And if you're not able to do that, or you want to do something else after that call, we'll come back on here and see what other questions that people may have, and we'll see if we can make it to midnight. I feel like this is like we're doing a telethon here. So, but this is, maybe this is going to be the last time that you do taxes. Maybe this is the year that you're going to say, I'm going to keep all of my money, but you're going to have to come out of that jurisdiction, and we have that pathway for you. All right. It's a peaceful process. It's just administrative. Okay. There's no fight. Okay. So, um, all right. So, we're changing up here. So we'll see this. And listen, we can see you back in a couple hours after we wrap up our calls. Hope we can see you on the calls. We'll find out if you were on the channel here. And if you aren't a subscriber, then please like and subscribe, and be sure to hit those notifications so that it'll let you know when we're doing something live like this, or when we uploaded another video. You'll get to see that stuff right away and enjoy that. Okay. So, all right, we'll be back a little later on. Stay tuned. I'm Christopher Gronski. This is DestinationFreedom.org.